Last week, you saw part 1 of my top 100. Those were some amazing coasters. But today, we're getting serious. Of my 563 credits, the top 50 represent the top 9% of all the coasters that I've ridden. This is a list that I've put out every year for the last 4 years, so let's run it back once again. As of the end of 2022, these are my top 50 coasters. Let's break down my top 50, first by manufacturer. RMC and B&M are tied at the top. Together, they make up more than half my list, with Intamin in a solid third. In part 1, we only had 2 RMCs, but we had 17 B&Ms. There are 13 manufacturers on here total, with one coaster being built in-house. Now, let's break it down by state. And my top 50 are spread out over 20 states. Plus, of course, you have 2 in Canada. Ohio has the top spot, followed by California and Florida. Pennsylvania was tied for first with 7 on the last video, but they only have 2 in my top 50. We also have a new state breaking into my top 50, that being Iowa. As for wood versus steel, last week we had 10 wood and 40 steel. This time we have 12 wood and 38 steel. Last one, the year these coasters opened. And no surprise, the newer years have the edge. 2018 and 2016 tied for first with 5. 2000 topped the list last week with 6, but it only has 2 in my top 50. Also, I have 2 coasters that opened in 2022. There wasn't a single new for 2022 coaster that made the list last week. Just like last time, I'll include last year's rank on the screen so you can see how much it's moved. Number 50 is Intimidator at Carowinds. It's hard to believe I've been to Carowinds 4 of the last 5 years, and every time I gotta get at least one ride on Intimidator. Even though it's one of the weaker B&M hypers, the airtime is awesome, and I got a ride with Sophie this year, and she said this was her favorite in the park. Number 49 is Griffin at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. I think the last time this was in my top 50 was way back in 2017. It kept getting pushed back, but this year I got 3 rides and I was super impressed. I said this was the way you do dive coasters. Smooth, airtime, good elements. To me, this is by far the best dive coaster in the country, and it's back in my top 50. Number 48 is Railblazer at California's Great America. I dropped its partner out of my top 50. Wonder Woman was running so rough this year. But as of 2021, Railblazer was still running awesome, so it stays in my top 50. It's a short ride, but it tries to rip your head off, and I love it. Number 47 is Twisted Cyclone at Six Flags Over Georgia. I've been so high on this in the past. Even though it's way too short, the elements always popped. This year, I got 2 rides and it wasn't running well at all, so I dropped it 18 spots from 29 to 47. I have ridden this enough to know it's a great ride. Another one I've ridden 4 of the last 5 years, but I hope when I get back, it's running as fast as before. Number 46 is Gold Striker at California's Great America. It's sad to think I may have ridden this for the last time, depending on the fate of Great America, and when I can get back to the park. It got retracked this year, and I guess it's running smoother. Last time I rode it, it was out of control awesome, but it beat me up. Number 45 is Behemoth at Canada's Wonderland. This has always been low in my top 50, but all 4 of my rides came on the same day in 2018. My goal for 2023 is to get back to Canada for some re-rides, and see if I can raise this up on my list. Most people put this near the top of their B&M hypers. Number 44 is Raptor at Cedar Point. Any invert that makes my top 50 is amazing, and only 2 of them are on this list. I didn't ride this in 2022, but last year it was so great I lifted it up to my number 2 invert. It was so smooth and so intense. Number 43 is Renegade at Valley Fair. I loved it last year, but I really needed some more re-rides, and I was lucky enough to get them this year. It really didn't change my opinion. I think I had it about right. The layout is elite, the airtime is off the chain in the back row, but it's one of the roughest wooden coasters that I've ever ridden, so it's gotta stay lower in my top 50. Number 42 is Goliath at Six Flags Great America. This is considered one of the weaker RMCs, but it's still amazing. My last rides in 2021 were great. Even though it's a topper track woody, it hasn't gotten rough. At least, not as much as Lightning Rod or Outlaw Run. And it's a short ride, but has some amazing elements. Number 41 is Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City. I was just talking about it. Yet another RMC topper track woody that's also short but super intense. This outranks Goliath for its setting and having some better airtime moments. But it would be a much better ride if it wasn't so rough. It's not enough to actually cause pain, but it's enough to staple you. Number 40 is Maverick at Cedar Point. This is a very consistent ride, even though it keeps drifting lower on my list. I do like that it gives you a great ride every time, throwing in a diverse mix of elements and offering so much whip. Not a perfect ride by any means, but I always come off really enjoying it. Number 39 is Hades 360 at Mount Olympus. I didn't get to ride this year, and my head and my back thank me for it. This has one of the great wooden coaster layouts of all time. It's just hard to put any higher when it's that crazy rough. Number 38 is Steel Eel at SeaWorld San Antonio. If you saw the video where I look at the coasters that shot up on my list, you saw how much I love Steel Eel this year. This was my third trip to the park, but this is the first time that I saw the ride have some power in the second half. This part had always been forceless to me, but no more. This year, it was a complete ride from start to finish, and it's the highest it's ever been on my list. Number 37 is Phoenix at Knoebels. I've been trying to find the best possible ride on this for years. It seems like I always go when it's cool, raining, and empty. In 2021, I went on a hot, dry, and crowded day, and I think I got Phoenix at its best. It's a great ride full of airtime, and for a relocated coaster from the 1940s, it still runs crazy smooth. I just don't think it can get any higher than this. Number 36 is Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure. I knocked it down after my ride last year. I know it was a morning ride, but I didn't have a great ride in 2019 either, and that was a night ride. I do love the layout. It mixes in big hills with an intense helix and a great finale. I've always been a Nitro defender, but I just wonder why it seems to be running so slow. Number 35 is Zippin' Pippin at Bay Beach. Being way up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, it's not an easy park to get to. That being said, I've ridden this 6 times over 2020 and 2021. If you love a wooden coaster with strong floater, and then one violent moment of ejector, that's Zippin' Pippin. It also gets points for the park it's in. You just walk in, pay your $1, and get right on. You can't beat that. Number 34 is Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood. I've been impressed with this ride since day one. I could lap it all day. It's insanely smooth, insanely fast, super comfortable trains and lap bars, and at the end of the ride, some of the strongest airtime in the world. Number 33 is Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa. After my 4th ride on my first trip in 2018, I said this is absolutely the best invert that I've ridden. I got back to the park in 2022 and rode this for the first time in 4 years, and it did not disappoint. Great layout, great use of trenches. It still runs pretty smooth. This is the gold standard of American inverts, and my highest ranked B&M looper. Number 32 is Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. I haven't ridden this in 3 years, but I've really been impressed with my rides in the past. It's considered one of the weakest RMC hybrids, and I think that's true, but it's got a very original layout and I appreciate that, combining great moments of hang time and airtime, even if the airtime isn't that strong. Number 31 is Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland. Just like Behemoth, it's been a long time since I've ridden this, but this one really impressed me. It was also my first B&M Giga. Despite the fact it's kinda short, I thought it did a good job showcasing its speed and mixing in some airtime. Number 30 is Orion at Kings Island. After thinking about my rides in 2022, I dropped this down on my list. I think I was more impressed with it in 2020. I didn't go in with high expectations, but I came off thinking it was a lot of fun. Maybe in 2022, I went in with higher expectations, and even getting my first night ride, I was kind of underwhelmed. I put it down closer to Leviathan since I think these offer pretty similar rides. Number 29 is Monster at Adventureland. One of the biggest winners of 2022 was this Gerstlauer Infinity Coaster. I really loved my first rides in 2021, but in 2022 it just hit different. I really came to appreciate the layout and all the forces. Gerstlauer did an amazing job with it, and it jumps 32 spots from last year. Number 28 is Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom. Kind of a similar story to Monster. I enjoyed my first rides back in 2018, but in 2020 when I got back on it, it blew me away and flew into my top 30. I haven't been back in 2 years, so I still have that great impression of it. Number 27 is Cannibal at Lagoon. It's impossible not to be impressed by this coaster, the only one that was built in-house on my list. From the lap bars, to the elevator lift, to the 116-degree drop at 208 feet, to all the crazy elements, it's a wild and well-rounded ride. Number 26 is TMNT Shellraiser at American Dream. I'm still living off my 2019 rides, and it was the bright spot of the park. You don't find many rides with a powerful launch and an amazing beyond vertical drop, this one being the world's steepest at 121.5 degrees. Throw in 7 inversions and it's just an amazing long layout. Number 25 is Iron Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. I got a couple rides this year and I thought it was running as good as ever. In fact, this year it seemed to carry some power on top of the quarry. Usually it crawls up there, but this time it was forceful. Number 24 is Millennium Force at Cedar Point. After my down ride in 2020, it totally redeemed itself in 2021. All the speed, the sprawling layout, the airtime moments. It all came together last year, so it stays in my top 25. Number 23 is Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. The more I rode this, the more I loved it. I got 4 rides this year, the last 3 coming in the last hour the park was open, and it totally deserves to make its top 50 debut inside my top 25. It's not a long ride, but it's a complete ride, offering all kinds of forces along with some of the most comfortable trains. Number 22 is Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios Florida. My ride in 2021 was one of the best rides I've had on any coaster. I'm almost afraid to go back and ruin it. It seems like most people who ride it hate it, and I would not be surprised if that was the case when I get back on it. For now, I'm comfortable putting it this high. Number 21 is Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. Aside from the insane vertical drop out of the station, this ride isn't super intense, but it's pure fun. Spinning while going upside down, also throwing in some crazy moments like the switchback. This is the star of Silver Dollar City. Number 20 is Storm Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom. I wasn't as impressed with this on my last ride in 2020. I was almost ready to crown it as a top 10 coaster back in 2018. I want to get back and see which rides were more accurate. It's small, but insanely powerful. Number 19 is Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. I got a few more rides this year, 2 of them being night rides, and my opinion did not change at all. That's a good thing. From the first time I rode this in 2018, it blew me away. To this day, it's still running super smooth and has that out-of-control feeling, mixing in some legit airtime. Number 18 is Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. Even though it's impossible not to have fun on this, it didn't stand out as much this year. When I first rode this, it was a top 10 coaster. Now I put it closer to the middle of my hyper list. The first half is great. You got sustained airtime on the camelbacks and the speed hill. Then you got the finale, which looks pretty, but isn't much to get excited about. I still love Mako, but I dropped it 6 spots this year. Number 17 is Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England. This is a very consistent hyper, pretty much the same story on all 3 of my trips to the park. Amazing layout, great airtime, great twister section, terrible lap bars. Number 16 is X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. I think I've said this before, but it's hard to believe that this ride exists. If you can get to Magic Mountain, ride this in the back row and experience the ride in all its glory. Nothing else in the country can compare to it. I last rode this in October. I got an awesome night ride, and even though it can beat you up, it's worth it. Number 15 is Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia. This was a big winner for me this year. My rides on this just seem to be getting better every year. And where Twisted Cyclone was a disappointment, Goliath was amazing from start to finish. The airtime is so strong and so sustained. Even if you get stapled, it's all good. And unlike other hypers, this has an awesome finale. It jumped 13 spots this year and into my top 15. Number 14 is Raging Bull at Six Flags Great America. As amazing as Goliath was, there's something special about Raging Bull. I don't know what it is about this ride. In a park with so many really good coasters, this is the one that I want to ride over and over again. I just want to sit in the back row and fly over that first drop. One of my favorite moments on any coaster. Number 13 is Magnum XL200 at Cedar Point. Here's another ride that just keeps getting better and better. And that's weird because it opened in 1989. In 2020 and 2021, it seemed to be running at its best. Honestly, my favorite rides that I got in the park on both of those trips. Just so much janky airtime and I love it. Number 12 is Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. This coaster will always be special to me, but for the first time ever, it falls outside my top 10. It just keeps getting passed up by newer and more aggressive coasters. I got one great ride this year, and I'm happy to say it's still running super smooth. Number 11 is Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion. Just barely missing my top 10 is this surprising RMC. One that doesn't look like a top tier hybrid, but it sure rides like one. It may not be tall, but it rides so low to the ground, all its elements really pop hard. Me and Sophie kept going around, riding this over and over until we absolutely had to leave. We cut our Carowinds stay short because of this, but it was worth it. Number 10 is Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. I used to ride this every week, and when I finally got to ride it in 2022, a whole year had passed by. It made me appreciate it more. Not that I ever didn't, but I couldn't ask for a better home park RMC for all those years living in California. 2 tracks, so much airtime, every element was great. Still a top 10 coaster. Number 9 is Diamondback at Kings Island. I rode this 3 or 4 times this year, and honestly, those rides were so great I wanted to move it up. I just couldn't, given what's ahead of it. Of all the B&M hypers, this is the king. Yeah, it rattles you around in the middle, but it seems like, from the first drop to the last, the airtime is so sustained, something you don't find to that level on other hypers. Number 8 is Lightning Rod at Dollywood. I got back to Dollywood for the first time in 3 years. I rode this 3 times, including once at night, and this was the first time that I rode it as a steel coaster. I gotta say, the steel track made a big difference. It was pretty rough on my rides in 2019. Now it was smooth and I didn't get stapled, and the quad down seemed even more powerful this time. It's another ride that I wish I could have moved up, but I couldn't. There's just no room. Number 7 is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens, Tampa. No surprise, this is the highest ranked new coaster on my list. It took me a while to properly rank it, but after 4 rides, it's easily in my top 10. I rode this first thing in the morning, and that ride wasn't even top 100, but by the end of the day, it showed me what it could do, and this is one powerhouse RMC. It lives up to the hype. Number 6 is Velocicoaster at Islands of Adventure. This is one of the most flawless rides I've ever ridden. All the modern technology, theming, and ride elements all in one. Also, great ops, great trains and lap bars, a long ride with 2 launches, so many great elements. I can see why a lot of people rank this number 1. Number 5 is Voyage at Holiday World. As of my last ride in 2020, it was running as smooth as I've ever seen it. I know Holiday World does a lot of work on it and it pays off. Its roughness always kept it out of my top 10, and I'll have to see how it rides on my next trip. But as of now, it's a top 5 elite coaster. Number 4 is Wicked Cyclone at Six Flags New England. It seems like every time I go to Six Flags New England, I think I'm gonna move this down on my list. It didn't happen in 2018, and it didn't happen in 2021. In fact, my last rides in 2021 were as good as ever. It even had some power in the second half, even in the morning. This may be way too high for some people, but you gotta appreciate that layout. Number 3 is El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. I've ridden this so many times, but not in the last 3 years. It's had so many problems since then. It's been closed a lot because of some major issues. It even seemed like it may be in danger, but Six Flags is committed to reopening this in 2023, and I can't wait to get back on it. It's one of the most powerful wooden coasters in the world, including 4 of my all-time favorite airtime moments. Number 2 is Fury 325 at Carowinds. I rode this twice this year, and to my surprise, Sophie thought it was boring. In her defense, our first ride was in row 2 and it was lacking some bite, but she held her opinion after a back row ride, which I thought was much better. So I don't know, that's her opinion. For me, I love this layout. It's a long ride with a perfect mix of speed and airtime, and this has one of the great turnarounds with the treble clef. Number 1 is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. This has been number 1 ever since I started posting my top 50. And what can I say? Sorry, not sorry. It was built to hit all of my favorite things about coasters. Tall, fast, smooth, long, and packed with airtime and whip. It keeps the speed through the whole course. Even when the mid-course is on and it slows down a little bit, not the end of the world. I'm not sure if there's a coaster in the world that exists right now that can beat it. So there you go, my top 50 coasters. Not a lot of radical movement, but there were a few that dropped big time, and some that jumped a lot. Plus, the 2 new ones that scored high up in their first year. If you have any thoughts on these coasters, or have a beef with my ranking, let me hear it in the comments below. Before you go, don't forget to drop a like, and if you're new here and love coasters, please give me a sub. Also, check out my links below for my Discord server, and my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage, and my baseball channel if you're also a baseball fan. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.